Our next speaker by videotape, I'm sorry to say that you drew the short straw. Senator Ted Cruz has actually been at each of these summits heretofore, but due to a family obligation, I think this time he was obliged to be elsewhere, but he was gracious enough to give us a short videotape to extend both his appreciation for your interest in these issues, and I'm sure his hope that you to us with respect to them. As you know, he served as the youngest and for the longest time Solicitor General of the state of Texas before becoming, amazingly, the 34th, I believe it was, United States Senator from Texas. Since he has arrived in Washington, it hasn't been quite the same, I have to say. Mostly in very good ways. He has been a leader on practically every issue you can think of and has taken a specific interest, a particular interest and helpful interest in the national security portfolio as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So with that, let me ask the folks in the back to roll the videotape of Ted Cruz.
Greetings to all of you who are gathered for the National Security Summit in Iowa. I'm very sorry not to be able to join so many friends today, especially as you are addressing the most vital issues that face our nation. I want to start by thanking Frank Gaffney for his tireless work to defend our nation and for giving all of us participating in the summit an opportunity to express our views. Frank, you are a warrior and a patriot, and I'm proud to call you a friend. And I want to thank all of you for bravely assembling unafraid. The topic of Sharia and free speech has shot into the headlines over the last week due to the events in Garland, Texas. Let's all be perfectly clear here. What happened in Garland was not an act of provocation. It was not any way justified. It was nothing else but an all-out assault on our First Amendment rights. And it wasn't carried out in some distant land. It happened right here in the United States of America. And the attackers were fellow Americans who decided to reject our founding principles and instead embrace a vicious, twisted version of fundamental Islam, according to which those principles that America was built on are considered blasphemy. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Because on the campaign trail, there's nothing I talk about more than the need to defend our constitutional rights. And that means all of them. Not just the first, not just the second, not just the 10th, all of them. Free speech is not negotiable. It doesn't just mean the speech you like or the kind that doesn't make any trouble. It means defending all speech. These freedoms are what have made America exceptional. The beacon of tolerance and liberty. They're what has allowed all of us to forge this most perfect, if unlikely, union. And they are what are under attack now. Under attack from the radical Islamic terrorists who want to destroy us. We have to start by being willing to utter the words, radical Islamic terrorism. And be crystal clear that the terrorists that are trying to kill us, not Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, are the real problem. For 6 years, we've had an administration that has not been willing even to admit that we have a problem. President Obama talks about workplace violence. He blames internet videos. Anything but admit that there is an organized, growing threat to our nation. Naming the problem is only the first step. We also need a real plan to combat the threat from jihad. ISIS is the face of evil. They are crucifying Christians, beheading children, and imposing Sharia law on thousands of people. They have publicly murdered 3 Americans, James Foley, Stephen Sotloff, and Peter Kasich, and posted the videos on the internet for the world to see. Now they are trying to make good on their repeated threats to attack us here at home. 9 months ago, President Obama initiated military action to combat ISIS. But it is so limited in scope that it has been highly ineffectual. We need to unshackle our military with a clear, defined objective and give them the latitude to defeat and destroy ISIS. We also need to take common sense steps here at home to protect ourselves. We know that there are Americans who are radicalizing on the internet and trying to join the jihad, just like the two terrorists who mounted the attack in Garland. We were lucky that they hadn't had extensive training, and one fine Texas police officer was able to help them meet their virgins. But we have to contemplate how much worse this situation could have been if they'd been better prepared, if they had gone and trained with ISIS in Iraq and Syria. That's why I've reintroduced in the Senate the Expatriate Terrorist Act to make joining a designated terrorist group an effective renunciation of American citizenship. In other words, if you go abroad and fight for ISIS, we're going to prevent you from coming back to the United States with a U.S. passport to wage jihad and to murder innocent Americans. I'm hopeful in the coming weeks that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will join me in getting this common sense bill passed. But as vicious and evil as ISIS is, we can't take our eye off the most significant threat to our security, which is the threat of the Islamic Republic of Iran armed with nuclear weapons. ISIS may be Sunni and Iran Shiite, but they are both, as Prime Minister Netanyahu rightly said, branches of the same poisonous tree, led by theocratic zealots who have pledged to annihilate Israel and who regularly lead chants of death to America. An Iran with nuclear weapons poses an unacceptably high risk of murdering millions of Americans or millions of our allies. Yet for the last 18 months, the Obama administration has attempted to engage Tehran and reach a negotiated settlement over the mullah's nuclear program. As we enter the final weeks leading up to the June 30th deadline, the proposed deal looks very bad indeed. So bad, in fact, that it may well make military conflict with Iran a virtual certainty. Under the terms that have been publicly announced, Iran will keep its nuclear centrifuges, will keep its enriched uranium, and will keep developing its ICBM program, which exists for the sole purpose of carrying a nuclear weapon to America. Under the terms of the deal, Iran will receive billions of dollars, which it will surely use to keep developing nuclear weapons, reportedly including a $50 billion signing bonus. Who in their right mind would give a $50 billion signing bonus to Iran? It's worth noting that even under one of the strictest regimes of international sanctions, Iran was still able to marshal the resources to become one of the world's leading state sponsors of terrorism. We can only imagine what Iran will do with this new source of funding, billions of dollars from America, which will certainly flow to Hamas, to Hezbollah, and to the Houthis, as well as Iran's proxies throughout Latin America. The Iranians' behavior speaks for itself. They are right now today unlawfully imprisoning multiple American citizens, Pastor Saeed Abedini and Amir Hekmati, as well as journalist Jason Rezaian, under brutal conditions, and they are withholding information on the whereabouts of Robert Levinson. They have killed Americans across the globe, and they have plotted to kill us here at home. And they are explicitly threatening to wipe our friend and ally, the nation of Israel, off the map. Indeed, in the midst of this negotiation, a senior commander in the Revolutionary Guard said the annihilation of Israel is non-negotiable. Given that, there's no way on earth we should be allowing billions of dollars to flow into a radical terrorist organization that has declared its object destroying Israel, which they call the little Satan, and ultimately destroying America, which they call the great Satan. They are telling us they want to kill us. Not 10 years ago or 20 years ago. They are telling us this right now. If history teaches any principle with abundant clarity, it is that if somebody tells you they want to kill you, believe them. And yet, the Obama administration is putting these theocratic zealots who have declared death to America on the path to having nuclear weaponry, the most fearsome weaponry known to man. Congress, in recent weeks, took up Iran sanctions legislation. The Corker-Cardin legislation is severely flawed, and I fought hard in the Senate to put real teeth in that legislation. What Congress should have done is insisted that no sanctions can be lifted on Iran without the express affirmative approval of both houses of Congress. Under our Constitution, there are two ways to make binding law. Either a treaty that is ratified by 2/3 of the Senate, or a law that is passed into law by both houses and signed by the President of the United States. Corker-Cardin is flawed because it sets up a system where the only way to stop the president from lifting sanctions is passing a resolution of disapproval that, if the president vetoes it, would take 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to override. It thus inverts the presumptions and puts us on an extremely likely path to sanctions being lifted and Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. It was a mistake for Congress not to defend our constitutional prerogatives. I introduced an amendment to flip the presumption the way it should be, but sadly, Senate Democrats blocked that amendment. At the end of the day, I voted for Corker-Cardin because there was some small positive benefit to delaying President Obama lifting sanctions for some small period of time and forcing another debate this summer on Iran. But what matters at the end of the day is not that we have the debate. What matters is that we stop a bad Iran deal. I intend to do everything humanly possible to stop a bad Iran deal. And I know the men and women gathered here intend to do so as well. This needs to be a central focus of debate across this country. And Senate Democrats need to be asked over and over and over again, are they okay with billions of dollars going to the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world? Are they okay with being complicit in sending billions of dollars to Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorists throughout the world who will use that money to murder Americans? Any Senate Democrat who signs off on that is complicit in becoming a leading funder of terrorism. And I will say this Obama deal, in all likelihood, makes military conflict with Iran a certainty. If President Obama is successful in undermining the international consensus against sanctions, it means the next president, when he or she arrives in the Oval Office in January 2017, is very likely to face an Iran on the verge of having nuclear weapons. If sanctions across the globe have been undermined, reimposing them in all likelihood will prove impossible, certainly in the time frame necessary to be effective. It would take months, if not years, if ever, to reimpose the global sanctions. What that means is the next president, on day one, may well receive an intelligence briefing that says Iran is on the verge of having nuclear weapons and the only option to stop it is direct military action. That is the consequence of President Obama's bad Iran deal. And I would note, if God forbid on January 2017 that next president is Hillary Clinton, then we can rest assured the next president, like the current president, would do nothing to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, the odds are unacceptably high they would use those weapons, either in the skies of Tel Aviv or New York or Los Angeles. If you want to understand the stakes in this next election in 2016, there is no more important stake than stopping Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons that could be used to murder millions of Americans or millions of our allies. That's what the men and women here are gathered to focus on, protecting the safety and security of the United States of America. And I want to thank each and every one of you for the work that you're doing to keep our nation safe. It is a dark and dangerous world, and it has gotten much, much more dangerous over the last 6 years under the Obama-Clinton foreign policy of leading from behind. But together, I am confident that we can face the challenges to America. We can come together, we can get back to our founding principles, and we can defend the greatest nation in the history of the world. Thank you, and God bless you.